starting in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, welcome to the Fragments Silicon Reviews. We're doing a few clerical things on this E3 week. Probably going to be a bit rushed here since we have Bethesda's conference in less than an hour, and we have a couple of games to get through. First up is Overload. In case you missed our interview with the creators of this game a few weeks back, Overload is basically Descent. And I'm probably going to have to explain what Descent is to the people, aren't I?
Yeah.
Descent was a relatively early 6 Degrees of Freedom space shooter / kind of exploration game.
Yeah, it's a 6 Degrees of Freedom FPS. If we're categorizing it.
Yeah, it's an FPS. It's just that you're playing as a spaceship rather than shooty big arms.
Right. And if you don't know what 6 Degrees of Freedom is, that's basically 360 degrees of movement.
Yeah, you can move anywhere.
You got your up and down, you got your left and right, you got your forward and back, and you can also roll.
Yeah.
Which is a great way to get lost.
Yeah, it's worth noting that up and down are relative.
Yeah.
Like, you will get confused as to what direction is which. I guarantee you.
Which way is up, literally?
In the single-player mode in this game, there is a decent map function, and I am very thankful for that.
Yes. Like, it's quite detailed, too. Like, it's helped me find some hidden shit. Anyway, yeah, so this comes from the creators of the first two Descent series of games. Descent 3 was like built by half of them. There's a whole story behind that, and then there was the whole free space line, which actually wasn't part of the Descent series, but it had the name attached at first because of some copyright thing. But that is a very brief history of this. And Overload here is the spiritual successor, and if you go back and watch or go play the old Descent games, you will know that this is Descent 3 or 4 or however you want to label it, because
it's absolutely a direct successor.
Yes, as in it's got many of the same elements, ideas, design, what have yous of the old games, only modernized.
The old ones did not have a good 3D map.
Yeah, though it's worth mentioning, for example, the I'm trying to remember the name of the bot that helps you find the security keys.
Holo Guide?
Yeah, the Holo Guide, that's actually a thing from Descent 2. And the overall mission structure of this game is outside of the every so mission, the first mission is just destroy all the robots. Mm-hmm. Your job is to go through the level and destroy a core and get out. That's another thing from the old Descent games. Mm-hmm.
The story setup of this is that there's a colony out in Saturn space.
Right.
And on the moons, and stuff has been going bad with the robots there, and you are assigned to go deal with.
Yes.
Lethal Force recommended.
Yeah. There is a lot of lore and details. That's something that's been modernized. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to say for the better, because honestly, it kind of felt overwrought to me.
Yeah, the original one was very much plunks you down in, and there might be text logs. In this one, there's a significant thing before you start, and then there are audio logs to pick up in stages and stuff like that.
Right. Another, I hesitate to say modern convention, but I guess
more modern than the original Descent convention.
True enough, because audio logs originated from the System Shock series, which is contemporaneous, only a few years removed from like the first two Descent games. Mm-hmm. It's just they got mega popular around the mid 2000s, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, as far as playing the game, so what's recommended is a flight stick.
For the love of God, yes.
Yeah,
failing a flight stick, it's doable with like an analog gamepad.
Yeah, and using a keyboard and mouse, once again, you can get by, but you're not going to get the precision that you usually get from an FPS. Mm-hmm. Like, if you
just because you have to deal with not just normally in an FPS you're on the ground, or failing a jet. If you have a jetpack or something, you're on the ground, and then you have like thrust to go up. In this thing, when you have to deal with roll and yaw and all that stuff,
you have to deal with.
It actually controls way better. I mean, thankfully they don't have like a rotation and then a thrust button.
Mm-hmm. I think there is a control scheme for that if you want it, though.
Yeah, like the way that it isn't like Asteroids, because that would be really harder to control. But in this, it actually controls pretty smoothly. I was playing on an Xbox 360 controller. It was pretty smooth most of the time. You can remap the controls because there are some awkward things with that. Like there's no analog roll.
Right.
Just a 90-degree roll. And the gain and lose relative altitude without tilting is mapped to the two left shoulder buttons. So but you can remap all that stuff if you want to. I was going to, but I couldn't figure out how I wanted it.
Yeah.
It's doable with that, but for God's sake, play it with something with an analog stick, either a flight stick or something, because keyboard and mouse is going to be clunky here.
Yeah, one of the big things is you have to deal with inertia. So, like, if you tilt, you're going to wobble. And what that does is it makes you a lot less accurate. Now, it's worth noting you can turn on various levels of aim assist, and you're probably going to need it if you're doing keyboard and mouse. Like, this is one of the few instances I can think of where a dual analog controller would be able to keep up with the keyboard and mouse.
Yeah, because you can't, like, with the way the keyboard and mouse aiming usually moves, it's you're standing in place and your gun is pointing around. The guns on your ship here are fixed to fire straight forward with a certain degree at which they are 0.
Yeah.
So when you're turning your aim, you're turning your entire ship.
Yeah, it operates a bit differently than your standard FPS, and is probably not very newcomer friendly, because the 6 degrees of shooter subgenre was never super populated even back in the day, but in the modern era, I would be hard pressed to really think of outside of the still in development, I think Descent Underground, another contemporaneous 6 degrees of freedom shooter. It's a pretty specialized, pretty niche splinter of the FPS genre, and it comes with its own exacting rules and regulations. Compounding that is, this is very old school design. Now, you might be seeing on the footage here, the game did update the visual look. It doesn't look like the old Descent games, which look very mid-90s, for lack of a better term.
It actually felt kind of fairly similar. Like it was still trying to get a fairly similar idea of you're in a space, like, and the designs of the ships and stuff were reminiscent.
It's just it's a lot shinier, and the lighting's a bit grimmer, let's say. But yeah, it is for all intents and purposes, a modern sheen on Descent, and that's fine. You know, like it looks pretty tremendous in action, and the sound, the music. I hope you like techno and rock.
Yeah, that is also very how it was.
Yeah, it's trying to go for as much of a mid '90s aesthetic as possible. It's just not in all areas was that possible. Like honestly, I think the overall aesthetical look is more reminds me of the mid 2000s like Doom 3 era than in places. Like when you get to say the Rock Cliffs, that looks a lot more like 1995. Like so it's worth keeping in mind this game was made for the old school. Specifically for, you know, people in their mid 30s or what have you who enjoyed the Descent games back in the day and wanted to do one. Because I'm not sure if the creators are in their mid 30s or they're probably older from what I remember in the interview. But the point is all the same. This is for people who grew up on this kind of shooter more than anything else. And it's also seen in the actual level design. I'm not talking about the
the levels in this game are on the long side for a shooter game.
Yeah, you will spend at least half an hour getting through it. I mean,
and for anyone who remembers the way that Doom was, similarly, there are a lot of secrets to find, some of which are just like hidden areas, some of which are power-ups. And you are scored at the end of the level on how many secrets you found and how many of the power-ups that were available you got. So you can, there's a reason to play it either very thoroughly or to try repeatedly.
Right, but you're not required to get these secrets or anything. You can just power on through.
Right, it's entirely optional, but it's definitely something that's there to appeal to the people who played these games originally, because that was a very common feature of games like this originally.
Yeah, and another idea that returned from Descent 2 is, and on like starting on level 2, I believe, you can find hostages in cryotubes and rescue them for up like one of the prime things you'll be collecting are upgrade points. So how the upgrade system works is a bit different than your normal, say, skill progression. Like, you know, you're putting points into things, but they don't keep. That is to say, you will have a pool of, say, 12 points at the beginning of the level, and you can put those into various things. The thing is, those only last for that level. So
so it's not a permanently getting better over the game. It's how strong you are for each mission is partially based on how well you did in the previous mission.
Thereabouts. Yeah, it's like you find challenge points and super challenge points in the levels, and you use those, like if you want better missiles, if you want better armor, if you want more energy, more ammo, that kind of thing. You can build yourself an array of improvements, but you're not committed to anything, which is a good and bad thing. Like, so, you know, the sense of getting stronger isn't as present as, you know, permanent upgrades are. But on the other hand, if you feel like you made a mistake in an area, you don't have to restart the entire fucking game to rescope. So it's a give and take. Let's see here. The difficulty, holy fuck. This is another old school.
The difficulty is very adjustable, but that doesn't mean that, I mean, the default difficulty is literally the second difficulty from easiest.
Yeah.
At the easiest difficulty, a lot of the time the enemies barely even fire at you. But even without enemies firing at you, there's still, like, you can, like, run into hazards and spend all your ammo and missiles shooting at things that you don't see, so...
Yeah, it's like, once again, if you're familiar with the likes of Wolfenstein 3D, Doom, Quake, you know, shooters from the mid-90s, you're going to be acquainted with the kind of difficulty this game can provide, which is on the higher difficulties, it will kick your ass.
And it will laugh while it does it.
There are about, 7 difficulty levels? There are at least 5.
Hey, Adam, does that make this the Dark Souls of 6-degree shooters?
No.
I'm funny.
I'm like, yeah, it's like, no, it's not the Dark Souls because this game is too fast. Like, Dark Souls is very deliberate. Although I'd say on the higher difficulties, you'll want to adopt a more methodical approach because the enemies will drain your health pretty quickly.
Honestly, in easy, they can still drain your health pretty quickly if they get the drop on you.
Yeah.
And you do have to be aware of all directions because attacks can come from any direction. So, when you go into a new area, it might be worth, looking above, below, to the left, to the right, and all of those things to make sure that there's not something that's, going to, as you just go forward slowly, you're not suddenly going to get shot, 10 times from directly above you.
Yeah, the enemies can ambush you.
Yeah, basically, there is no problem in save scumming. Like, there's a reason why Save Anywhere was a feature of 90s shooters, 90s FPSs. It's because they would do the monster closet thing and kick your ass. This game does that a lot.
And again, it laughs while it does it.
Yeah, it's like, this is very much find the key card, open the door, get to the end of the level, destroy the core, and escape. So, if you don't like that kind of design or have not been acquainted with it, you might want to tread elsewhere, because this game is really not giving a fuck about your modern sensibilities.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine. This game was built with that expert purpose. Now, it's like I think the challenge in here is fair for the most part. I will say enemies did tend to get bullet spongy after a while, and honestly, the levels got exhausting.
Yeah, you do get missiles. Don't be afraid to use them sometimes.
Yeah, yep. Missiles of all kinds. They are your friend.
There are also different primary guns too, some of which are much better at dealing damage quickly.
Yeah, and some will use your energy reserves, which are used for a lot of things, not just say your weapons, but also headlights, flares, what have you.
Yeah, you have headlights. There will be areas where you need to use headlights.
Mm-hmm. And you can traverse the dark, or you can spend the energy on headlights.
Or you also have a flare option.
Right. I usually just traverse the dark. Now, because honestly, even using the holo guide uses energy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think on the higher difficulties, on the lower ones, I think it's infinite.
That is possible. Once again, this game is going to last you a long time, 20, 30 hours probably. I only got, there are about 13 with a 14th hidden level, if I'm remembering the interview correctly. That may not sound like a whole lot, but once again, keep in mind you're not going to be speeding through this thing in minutes. Your first go through.
You have a boost, but it will get you killed if you're just starting out.
Yeah.
Although there are, having been reminded of its existence, there are some secrets you can only get by ramming into a grate with your boost.
Yeah. Also, the boost is a weapon, should you so use it. Personally, I always forgot that the boost existed.
Yeah, it's more of a last resort if you run out of actual energy, because I think it does recoil damage to you as well if you hit an enemy.
Yes. Let's see. Pricing. So this game clocks in at $30, which is a perfectly acceptable price point, and in fact, it may be a bit on the cheap side if I'm being honest.
Yeah, it has a lot of single player variety, and there is also a multiplayer which we covered on Friday.
We covered the multiplayer in more detail on Friday. But to recap, I wouldn't buy this game for the multiplayer. It's pretty vanilla and it's pretty limited in its scope of modes.
The only asterisk is if you're going to be at a LAN party.
Yeah, it's fun for what it is, but it's not going to be. It's not enough reason to buy the whole game.
Yeah. And I don't recall people really extolling the virtues of Descent's multiplayer.
Well, apparently it's still being played if the interview is to be believed.
True, it's got its fan base, no doubt, and I'm sure Overload's going to have its fan base. It's just from an objective measure, I wouldn't buy this for the multiplayer primarily. Like, it's a nice addition, but the single player is clearly the main event here. Right then. So, any other thoughts on this title?
If you really want to get into it, find a fight stick. Aside from that, be careful if you have motion sickness issues. I couldn't play this for more than 20 minutes at a time.
Yeah, none of us did it, but this game is VR compatible.
Yeah, I would probably be vomiting everywhere.
Yeah. All right, I think that'll about do it. So be sure to tune in a couple minutes from now. We just have to redress everything, but we have to cover Super Sports Machen next. Good gaming and such.